Hi, this is Daniel. I serve as a spokesperson for Nehemiah Reset. Today I want to talk to you about how democratic socialism impacts politics today. The recent surge of democratic socialism in American city, local, and state politics represents one of the most significant ideological shifts in modern American governance. This movement, which has seen self-described democratic socialists win mayoral races in New York City and Seattle in 2025, is not an overnight phenomenon, but rather the culmination of years of growing economic anxiety, demographic changes, and strategic organizing by groups like the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA. The victories of figures like Zohran Mamdani in New York and Katie Wilson in Seattle signal a fundamental reimagining of urban governance in response to pressing crises of affordability and inequality. This video will explore the key figures driving this movement, their proposed agendas, the factors behind their electoral success, and how their policies align with the current political climate reshaping American cities. First, let's look at the New York Revolution and Zohran Mamdani's historic mayoral victory. The election of Zohran Mamdani as mayor of New York City stands as a watershed moment for democratic socialism in America. At just 34 years old, Mamdani became the city's first millennial mayor and its first openly democratic socialist to hold the office. His path to victory was remarkable. He defeated former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary despite Cuomo initially being the frontrunner. This upset victory demonstrated the depth of New Yorkers' desire for change beyond the establishment politics that had long dominated city governance. Mamdani's campaign focused intensely on affordability issues that resonate deeply with working-class New Yorkers. His platform included raising the minimum wage, improving public transit, implementing more progressive tax codes, and strengthening tenant protections. These policies directly address the daily struggles of residents who have watched New York become increasingly unaffordable over the past decade. His victory speech, which opened with a quote by American socialist Eugene V. Debs, signaled that despite reassurances during the campaign about governing effectively, he remained committed to his democratic socialist principles. The demographic coalition that propelled Mamdani to victory reveals much about the changing electorate. Exit polls showed he won 62% of white youth and approximately 84% among younger Black and Hispanic voters. This generational support reflects how younger Americans, burdened by student debt and facing an impossible housing market, are increasingly supportive of policies that challenge neoliberal orthodoxy. Mamdani's success also benefited from the organizational infrastructure of the Democratic Socialists of America, which has grown to over 80,000 members nationally and saw a surge in membership after the 2024 presidential election. The second political battle occurred in Seattle's and resulted in a socialist surprise. On the opposite coast, Seattle's mayoral race produced an equally stunning result with the election of Katie Wilson, a 43-year-old Democratic socialist who had never held elected office before her mayoral run. Wilson's victory over incumbent Bruce Harrell, a centrist Democrat, came after a nail-biting contest that took more than a week to call due to Washington's vote-by-mail system. The narrow margin of her win, secured after later arriving votes that historically trend more liberal, broke heavily in her favor, underscores the significance of this ideological shift. Wilson, who co-founded and serves as executive director of the Transit Riders Union, built her campaign on a foundation of progressive populism. She decided to run after Mayor Harrell opposed a February 2025 ballot measure that would have funded housing through taxes on high-income residents. This opposition, which aligned Harrell with business interests, created the opening for Wilson's insurgent campaign. Her top three priorities as mayor are housing, homelessness, and protecting Seattle from federal actions, particularly those of the Trump administration. Like Mamdani, Wilson's campaign focused intensely on affordability issues. She criticized Harrell for being part of the status quo and failing to properly address homelessness and the cost of living. Her platform called for higher taxes on the wealthy to finance construction of new housing, a position that directly challenged the city's corporate interests. Wilson was described as the intellectual architect of Seattle's Jumpstart tax, a tax on corporations with large payrolls, though she has also said she's not going to be stupid about how she approaches progressive taxation as mayor. The comparisons between Wilson and Mamdani were frequent throughout their campaigns. Both ran on similar agendas, emphasizing affordability, public transit, and stronger renter protections. However, their styles differ markedly. As one Seattle political observer noted, they are almost opposite sides of the same coin in terms of personalities. This contrast highlights the diverse faces of democratic socialism. It's not a monolithic movement, but rather a Big Ten approach to progressive governance that accommodates different personalities and leadership styles. So, why do we see so much democratic socialism now? The victories of Mamdani and Wilson did not occur in a vacuum. They represent the crest of a wave that has been building for years, accelerated by specific economic and political conditions. The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic exposed and exacerbated existing inequalities, leaving millions of Americans financially vulnerable while corporate profits soared. Simultaneously, the return of Donald Trump to the presidency and his efforts to send federal agents into blue cities and cut their funding helped reawaken progressive voters who might otherwise have remained disengaged. Affordability emerged as the central issue driving these electoral victories. As Wilson herself noted, ordinary people are feeling the high cost of everything from rent to childcare to food to gas. This economic anxiety transcends traditional political divisions and creates openings for candidates willing to challenge market fundamentalism and propose redistributive solutions. The focus on practical, material concerns rather than abstract ideological battles has made democratic socialism increasingly palatable to voters who might previously have been scared off by the label. Generational dynamics also play a crucial role. Both Mamdani and Wilson won decisive support from younger voters who have graduated with massive college debt, navigated a dire job market, and faced an even worse scramble for housing. These millennials and Gen Z voters know what it's like to buy business attire at Goodwill and struggle to afford childcare on top of student loans. Their lived experience with economic precarity makes them more receptive to systemic solutions rather than incremental tweaks to a system they perceive as fundamentally broken. The political infrastructure supporting these candidates has also matured significantly. Organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America have moved from peripheral activism to serious campaign operations capable of fielding and supporting winning candidates. As of August 2025, over 250 DSA members held public offices across 40 states, with 90% elected after 2019. This includes 96 city councilors and county commissioners and 8 mayors or county executives. DSA members make up significant blocks on several major city councils, including 7 of 50 seats in Chicago, 4 of 12 seats in Portland, Oregon, 4 of 13 in Minneapolis, and 4 of 15 in Los Angeles. Most of the early victories have been on the coasts. While New York and Seattle have garnered the most headlines, the trend toward democratic socialism extends beyond these coastal hubs. The 2025 election cycle saw socialist candidates winning offices across the country, from Larry Agron in Irvine, California, to Emma Mulvaney Stanek in Burlington, Vermont. These victories, while smaller in scale than the mayoral wins, demonstrate the geographic breadth of this political shift. In California, the political dynamics are somewhat more complicated. While New York lurched left with Mamdani's victory, Californians largely back moderates like Governor Gavin Newsom and San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie. This divergence highlights how different regions are responding differently to the national economic pressures driving the socialist surge. For progressive activists in San Francisco, Mamdani's success in New York served as a sobering reminder of just how far they've fallen in this one-time bastion of progressivism. The Midwest presented a mixed picture, with some socialist candidates struggling to break through in the way their coastal counterparts did. In Minneapolis, for example, incumbent Jacob Frey won re-election against socialist challenger Omar Fateh, despite Fateh being dubbed the Mamdani of Minneapolis and drawing national attention. This regional variation suggests that while the trend is national in scope, its expression is filtered through local political cultures and institutional structures. What works in New York or Seattle may need adaptation to succeed in Des Moines or Cleveland. Despite these regional differences, the overall trajectory is clear. As the Nation noted, with leaders like Mamdani and Katie Wilson, they will build that tent, winning younger voters to the Democrats and passing universal social democratic policy into law. This vision of a progressive realignment within the Democratic Party represents both a threat to established interests and an opportunity for transformative change. So, what do these socialist mayors actually want to do? The policy platforms of Mamdani, Wilson, and other newly elected socialist officials share common themes while reflecting local priorities. Housing affordability stands at the center of nearly every agenda. Mamdani has called for massive investment in public housing and stronger rent control measures in New York City, proposing a Housing for All plan that would allocate billions in city funds to acquire and renovate distressed properties, converting them into permanently affordable cooperatives and public housing units. He has also championed the good cause eviction legislation, which would provide universal rent stabilization, preventing landlords from evicting tenants without a valid business reason and capping rent increases on all apartments. Wilson's campaign in Seattle was similarly focused on housing, particularly after she entered the race specifically in response to Harrell's opposition to a ballot measure funding social housing through taxes on businesses. Her Housing First approach called for the construction of 20,000 new units of social housing over the next decade, funded by a progressive speculation tax and higher taxes on the city's largest corporations. Public transit represents another key priority. Wilson's background as co-founder of the Transit Riders Union informs her emphasis on improving and expanding public transportation options. She has advocated for making the bus system free for all riders, a policy she argues would reduce traffic congestion, lower carbon emissions, and provide a lifeline to low-income residents. Mamdani has similarly called for major investments in New York's subway system and bus network, proposing a fare-free future that would be phased in over several years, starting with eliminating fares for low-income riders. Both candidates recognize that transportation policy is deeply intertwined with economic opportunity and environmental justice, viewing public transit not as a commodity to be sold, but as a public good essential for a functioning city. Progressive taxation forms the financial foundation for these ambitious agendas. Both Mamdani and Wilson have proposed higher taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations to fund social programs. Mamdani's plan includes a millionaire's tax on incomes over $5 million, increased taxes on second homes, and a financial transaction tax on Wall Street trades. He has also pledged to use the city's procurement power and pension fund investments to support local businesses and worker cooperatives. Wilson, who was instrumental in designing Seattle's Jumpstart tax on high-salary businesses, has suggested expanding it and implementing a wealth tax on individuals with assets over $50 million. She has argued that the city's wealthiest residents and corporations, who have benefited immensely from Seattle's economic boom, have a moral and practical obligation to pay more to address the crises of homelessness and affordability that have accompanied that growth. Beyond these core issues, their agendas include significant investments in public education, healthcare, and green energy. Mamdani has called for fully funding New York City public schools, eliminating the specialized high school admissions test that he argues perpetuates segregation, and creating a municipal public health option to provide health care to all uninsured residents. Wilson has proposed a Green New Deal for Seattle, which would retrofit thousands of buildings for energy efficiency, expand the city's bike lane network, and create thousands of union jobs in renewable energy and climate resilience projects. Both have also been strong advocates for workers' rights, pledging to use their offices to support union organizing efforts, require project labor agreements on all city-funded construction, and fight for a $20 minimum wage index to inflation. The electoral victories of Democratic Socialists Zohran Mamdani in New York City and Katie Wilson in Seattle have been framed as a response to the severe affordability crises plaguing these major cities. Their platforms, centered on taxing the wealthy, implementing rent control, and providing free public services, resonate with a populace grappling with high costs of living. However, a critical analysis of these proposals, grounded in historical precedent and economic principles, suggests they are likely to exacerbate the very problems they aim to solve. For example, what has been the previous experience with the failures of core socialist policies? First, what has been the experience of the policy of taxing the rich? A cornerstone of both Mamdani's and Wilson's platforms is the taxation of high earners and large corporations to fund expansive social programs. Mamdani plans to fund his agenda, estimated to cost $10 billion annually, with an additional tax on those earning over $1 million a year. Wilson in Seattle has similarly proposed a city-level capital gains tax and has previously been instrumental in passing the Jumpstart payroll expense tax, which targets large employers like Amazon. The fundamental flaw in this strategy is its reliance on a small, mobile tax base. High-income individuals and corporations are not static. They can and do relocate to more favorable tax environments. Following Mamdani's victory, many New York CEOs and financiers predicted an accelerated flight of capital to lower tax states like Texas and Florida. This capital flight erodes the tax base, leading to a downward spiral where the anticipated revenue fails to materialize, leaving the city with budget shortfalls and unfunded liabilities. This creates a situation where, as one commentator put it, it's much harder to pay for all these free programs when the evil rich people aren't there to tax. Furthermore, these tax policies require approval by state legislatures, creating a significant hurdle that may ultimately render the entire funding model untenable. Secondly, what happens when politicians institute rent control? Both mayors-elect have championed aggressive tenant protections, with Mamdani's freeze the rent being a central rallying cry. The intention is to provide immediate relief to renters, but the long-term consequences of such price controls are well documented and overwhelmingly negative. Rent control acts as a powerful disincentive for developers to build new housing or for landlords to maintain existing properties. By artificially capping the potential return on investment, it chokes off the supply of new housing units at the exact moment when more housing is desperately needed. As the Cato Institute's Ryan Bourne observes, such policies produce rental housing shortages and inefficiency, deepening the very crisis they purport to solve. New York City itself is a prime example of this dynamic. Its existing semi-socialist policies, from rent control to excessive taxation, are cited as a reason for the city's shrinking population and stagnant growth. The attempt to enact rent control in Seattle under City Councilmember Kshama Sawant also failed, despite a massive grassroots effort, because it represented a much larger threat to the capitalist class and required a movement far larger than what could be mobilized. The third program that could be in danger is the free transit program. The promise of free bus service and universal childcare is politically potent but fiscally perilous. These programs are not free. They're paid for by taxpayers, either through the taxes on the rich mentioned above or by diverting funds from other essential services like sanitation, infrastructure maintenance, or public safety. Mamdani's plan to triple the production of subsidized housing with 200,000 new units over a decade is estimated to cost a staggering $100 billion, a burden that would fall squarely on city taxpayers. The government's track record in running large-scale enterprises efficiently is poor. Mamdani's proposal to create a network of city-owned grocery stores is a case in point. Critics aptly compare this to the efficiency of the post office, the VA, or other government-run programs, predicting it would be plagued by the same bureaucratic bloat and mismanagement. Milton Friedman's critique of government-funded childcare is also relevant, noting that such policies penalize the family in which the mother stays at home to provide childcare, effectively taxing traditional families to pay for the childcare of others. What are some historical precedents which show a legacy of failure? These are not new ideas. They've been tried in various forms and have consistently failed to deliver on their promises of prosperity and equity. The Soviet Union's command economy collapsed under the weight of its own inefficiency, unable to produce the basic goods and services its citizens needed. In the modern era, Venezuela provides a stark example. Once a wealthy nation, it pursued socialist policies of price controls, nationalization of industries, and massive social spending. The result was economic collapse, hyperinflation, and widespread shortages of basic necessities, including food and medicine. Domestically, cities that have heavily embraced these policies, like New York City itself, suffer from chronic housing shortages, decaying infrastructure, and population loss as residents and businesses flee from more opportunity-rich environments. How has the role of education created an appeal of this democratic socialism experiment among today's youth? The question remains, why do these failed ideas continue to attract support, particularly from young voters? The answer lies in a combination of economic pain and ideological indoctrination. Young people today are facing unprecedented economic pressure. When young people can't afford rent, can't buy a home, and feel locked out of opportunity, they understandably look for someone to blame, and they gravitate towards simple, sweeping solutions. Mamdani's victory was driven in large part by young voters. He won 62% of white youth and about 84% among younger Black and Hispanic voters. They are responding to a very real sense of desperation, and socialism offers a seductive narrative of easy answers and villains, the rich, the corporations, who could be punished to solve the problem. This vulnerability is exploited by an education system that has largely abandoned economic literacy in favor of ideological indoctrination. As one commentator noted, the rise in approval of socialism among young Americans is driven by the education system. Schools and universities have become incubators for far-left thought, presenting a sanitized version of socialism that highlights its supposed virtues of fairness and equality, while completely ignoring its century-long history of economic ruin and human suffering. Students are taught to resent the free market system that has generated unparalleled wealth and opportunity, and instead are sold the false promise of a government-managed utopia. This creates what Michael Harrington of the Democratic Socialists of America called a conscience constituency of educated professionals predisposed to social planning, who then go on to shape culture and policy. In conclusion, the platforms of Mayor-elects Mamdani and Wilson are a recipe for economic disaster. Their policies of taxing the rich, imposing rent control, and expanding government services are based on flawed premises and ignore the clear lessons of history. Rather than creating affordability, they will drive away the tax base, choke off housing supply, and lead to fiscal crisis. Their appeal is a testament to the failures of the current system to provide opportunity. But it is also a damning indictment of an education system that has failed to equip young people with the critical thinking skills needed to see through the seductive but empty promises of socialism. I hope this video helps you better understand why these races in New York and Seattle resulted in the new winning strategies, and gets our conservative Christians to explore how to better attract these ancient ideas of democratic socialism. Every place this has been tried, it has failed and resulted in some of the largest genocides in history. To watch more videos like this one, visit our website at nehemiahreset.org or our rumble.com channel. We look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Have a great day. Are you looking for a limitless supply of insightful reads to expand your mind and transform your life? Look no further than Nehemiah Reset's ebook library, where knowledge meets inspiration at nehemiahreset.org/ebook. Go there today to discover a wealth of valuable resources to help you on your personal and professional journey to build a biblical worldview. Learn more about the Bible and how culture is impacting your worldview. Again, that the ebook library is located at nehemiahreset.org/ebook. Hope to see you soon. My name is Mark. I am one of the spokespersons for Nehemiah Reset. The prior video was sponsored by Nehemiah Reset, a 501c3. Our mission is to assist Christians in developing a biblical worldview as it pertains to relevant cultural and biblical issues. We seek to inform Christ's followers, equip them, and mobilize them into action to vote for their biblical values and to actively engage in our culture. We are also committed to help Christians and non-believers to develop a better biblical view. Nehemiah Reset produces videos and ebooks to assist members of the church in developing a biblical worldview when it comes to cultural issues. We produce videos on key topics like public school indoctrination, the woke agenda, sex education, equity and inclusion, climate change, immigration, religious freedom, and much, much more. To learn more about Nehemiah Reset or to watch our latest videos, go to our website at nehemiahreset.org or our rumble.com channel. We produce 2 to 3 videos every week. To get a weekly list of our latest videos, sign up for our weekly newsletter by going to nehemiahreset.org/email and subscribe. You can support our website by liking our videos, subscribing to our channels, or helping us reach more people through tax-exempt donations. Thanks for your help in growing God's kingdom and bringing more people to Christ. Thank you for your support and help. Come back again soon. Have a great day.